Hey, are you ready to grow your business? You have checked out the number one resource for business leaders, entrepreneurs, startup founders, and managers. And we're going to teach you how to grow and scale your business with real actionable steps. There's no fluff in this podcast. It's just good advice. Check out this episode. If you're a first-time listener, make sure you subscribe to the podcast. And if you enjoy this episode, leave us a 5-star review. Today's episode is with LeRon Barton. LeRon is an author. He's a writer. He's been a TedX speaker. He calls himself a cultural disruptor. I really enjoyed my conversation with him. I think you will as well. Stay tuned. Here comes your good advice. Are you ready for some good advice? I am sitting down with my friend LeRon Barton, who's joining the show today. He is an incredible writer, author, speaker. I've been following some of his content for a little bit now, and I got to say, I am a huge fan. LeRon has quite the story. He has quite the perspective, and I'm excited to bring that to you here today. LeRon, thanks for joining the show.
Hey man, Blake, thank you so much for having me, man. I really appreciate it. I'm always honored and blessed and humbled, when people invite me onto their podcast. I mean, just, onto their platform. So, I'm really jazzed about this.
Well, and here's the deal, man, is not, I'm sure there's a guest out there who's going to throw a shoe at me, but not all guests are created equal in terms of the value on the show. And
right.
So I know we had to reschedule our first meeting. Man, I'm so excited that we got it booked a second time because I really have been excited to get you on. I think you're going to be a great guest. I think you're going to share some really great insights with our audience today.
That's what's up, man.
Yeah.
Well, man. I'm ready to rock and roll.
Cool. Well, let's talk about really what your sweet spot is, because I said that you're a writer, you're an author, you're a speaker, which all those things are true. But I know they're also a bit vague. And so I want to dive in on what your passion is, what you're excited about. And when you're writing, when you're speaking, what are the things that really drive you? Talk to me a little bit more about that.
Yeah. For me, at my basis, at the crux of who I am, I'm a writer, everything flows from the writing. So, being a writer, I like to talk about different things. I'm mainly a nonfiction writer. I write a lot of essays. I write a lot of op-eds. I write journalistic pieces, investigative pieces. And so, my job is to just essentially give people a different perspective and uncover and shine a light on things that people may not know. It's one of those things where when I think I was 38 and I realized, this is what I was meant to do. I was meant to create content that sort of challenges people, that, really, sort of spurs people to ask questions and to really look at life differently. So.
And I would say that's true about you, because so if we can just get real nitty gritty, I grew up in a mostly predominantly white background. And so part of my journey, I became a high school teacher, and I was working in the Houston inner city school district, which is less than 1% white. And my world was flipped in the sense of my perspective. And so I know you write a lot about race. I know you talk a lot about race. And so I find myself every time I'm watching one of your videos or reading what you've written, I find myself pausing and thinking really honestly, okay, what are because, even this conversation of self-awareness, you don't even really realize the biases or the things that you don't even really think about until someone else.
Right.
And I don't mean in a bombastic way when I say someone exposes a different perspective. But when someone else says another perspective, I think it's really powerful when that person's huh, okay, this is interesting.
Right. Yeah. No. I think that should be one of the responsibilities of a writer is to challenge people, is to sort of hold a mirror up to their faces and say, hey, this is where we are. I mean, I think not only for writers, but I just think for artists, period. I mean, we should strive to do what we can to change the world. I mean, don't get me wrong, commerce is great. Commerce is what runs the world, but I'm trying to change the world. You know what I mean? And so I just want, I'm trying to change the world. I want to show people that you can come from like different circumstances and, be and create important work that sort of strikes a chord, work that really sort of hits on it, and so it's, for me, Blake, it's not about just doing something that's going to appease the masses. I don't have a problem with people doing that, because we all have our own lanes. But it's like, for me personally, I just can't do something to just get hits or to get clicks or to just have something that's going to be just widely read. Mm-hmm. I mean, I have always, sort of stepped to this from creating substance. And when I've done work like that, I never really felt good about myself. So, there was a particular piece where I wrote, it was, I like to refer to it as, my pop song. And I was like, I'm going to write this piece about, white allyship. And it was really simple. It was like, gosh, it wasn't even like a lot of words, but it struck a chord with a lot of people. And I was like, well, this is not what I'm really about, but people like it. But I was talking to a friend. I was like, I just don't think that I'll ever write anything like that again, because it didn't make me feel good. And so I think that another thing about being a writer, being an artist, is that you have to be true to yourself. And when you're true to yourself, it really shines through.
So was it like the attention that you didn't like, or did you feel like you had kind of, it's probably too harsh a statement to say like you sacrificed your values, anything like that. I know you're not saying you wrote anything like immoral or like unethical.
No.
I'm trying to hone in on like, what was it that made you feel like, oosh, I don't know if I really want to do that again.
I wrote something specifically for it to be popular. Okay. And yeah, and it's just like, again, like, would never compare myself to Dylan, but let's say Bob Dylan tried to write something like Pink, and it became really popular, right? I mean, mm-hmm. And it's like, Bob Dylan is this deep writer, but it's like he's writing a pop song, and I just would never do that again. Mm-hmm. It just didn't make me feel good inside. So
mm-hmm. I guess it's kind of like the journey of, not even just entrepreneurship, but you're in some ways you're kind of finding, it's like, you're finding kind of who you are as a person through how right. you feel after you do things. It's like, and it's not things like, even like, and I don't even mean things that are like super unethical, like you make a sleazy sale and it's like, I didn't feel good about that. But like, even things that speak to like who you are and like, what you really believe in and like your perspective. I think that's a journey that everyone really, if they give themselves the time, will go on at some point.
Right. Exactly. No, like I totally agree.
Now, looking at, and specifically when you're writing, is this like a pretty lengthy creative process, or does this, do the words kind of just flow out of you?
No. So, sometimes I'll be inspired by something that'll happen, something that I'll see, just something like an idea that will hit me, and then I'll just immediately start writing out, quote unquote, ride the wave. But sometimes pieces take a while to sort of create, because I mean, when it's like you can be writing about one thing, but then it sort of takes you around to this journey to another thing, and the piece comes out differently, it comes out better. You may look at it and be like, I really didn't want to arrive at this standpoint. And so, it takes, I mean, like, I would like to say quality takes time, mm-hmm. and for me, honestly, like, some of my best ideas come from just me walking around. Like, mm-hmm. I love to take walks. Like, so, when I'm taking walks or, and I've got my I've got my headphones on and I'm blaring music, and it's just an idea will come. So what I'll do is like I'll grab the notes app on my phone, and I'll just start jotting down ideas like, and and that's the thing that like the notes app for me is one of the most valuable things that I have, because there's so many ideas that I used to have, Blake, and I didn't write them down, and I would forget them. And
Right.
we would like to think that our memory's good, but life, we have so many things going on in it. So it's like we're bound to forget things. And so I said, look, I'm not going to forget anything. I'm going to write it down. Like I'm 41 years old. Like I would like to think that my memory is like an elephant, but it's not. So
It's like a goldfish.
write it. Yeah, I mean, dude, write it down. Write this stuff down, because it could be a great idea. You lost it, and you probably won't get it back.
Well, so you said, you're writing for change, really. I mean, you're writing not for clicks, but for people to take it, get a new perspective, ideally apply it, and be different. What's the one thing you've written that you are most proud of?
Man, there's been a couple. Just off the top of my head, I wrote a piece last year about sexual assault of young Black boys, and this piece was just, it sort of highlighted how older women may have sex with these younger boys, and how it's not looked at as molestation or as sexual assault, and how that can sometimes, how that many times can ruin a young man. So I wrote that. I wrote a piece called "Musing on Survival," which was about just the difficulty of young men, of any race or color, whatever, coming from harsh circumstances, coming from the ghetto, from the hood, from just like poverty, staying, like the difficulty of staying out of prison. And I mean, it's things, it's things like that. I mean, just pieces that really make people think. So this is those are a couple of the ones that I'm really proud of, and I'm definitely gonna be writing deeper stories. I wrote a really cool story last year about food deserts, which is something that I wanted to talk about. For those who don't know what food deserts are, is that when you live in an area of poverty, and when there's not a lot of nutritious food options available, and so you're stuck with a lot of corner store food, unhealthy food from the bodega, just fast food. It's just like not a lot of healthy choices. So I thought that piece was really good.
Yeah, that reminds me of I remember when I was a high school teacher, we watched some video. So I taught one of the classes I taught had like man, I can't even think of the word. I can't think of the word. It's like when you're taking care of the environment.
Right.
Ecology class. And
Sure.
obviously I wasn't a very good teacher because I can't even remember the terms of it. But one of the things we were talking about was food accessibility, and how, buying the actual like nutritional good food, you're going to be paying like $2 to $3 more per item compared to,
right.
Well, a family in poverty, it sure is a lot easier to pay for. And I remember there was like a picture that I had of like prices of objects, and it was like you could pay 99 cents for this mega size bag, or you could pay like the $4 for half the size. And so it's really kind of a no-brainer for a family in poverty. But it doesn't do much for nutrition and development and things like that.
Absolutely, man. I mean, it's healthy food costs a lot. Organic food costs a lot. I wrote a post last week about fat shaming, and the rapper Lizzo being attacked. And one of the things that I wrote is that when we talk about poverty and obesity, we have to look at food choices.
Hmm.
And there's a reason why, the wealthy can stay alive, longer, which is what I wrote. And it's because of things such as they're able to buy higher quality food, as well as being able to go to the gym, because the gym costs money, fitness
Right.
costs money. So, a lot of times you can't run and jog anywhere. So, there's there's so many little, sort of facets to being healthy.
Well, I had someone explain it to me as like something as simple as going to the dentist. If someone can't afford to go to the dentist, they're more likely to develop cavities, and they especially
Absolutely.
can't pay for the cavities to get filled. So like their dental health is declining, and it's like these things compound on themselves to make it even more and more and more expensive, which directly relates to quality of life and longevity of life. And
Absolutely.
it's pretty incredible to think about.
Yeah. I mean, when you were talking about, going to the dentist and cavities, one of the biggest debates that we have in this country is healthcare. And, many people can't afford insurance. Many people can't afford to go to the doctor. So, as you said, Blake, it compounds and it compounds. I was talking with a friend of mine, Dominique, and we were talking about how healthcare and how hospital bills can bankrupt somebody.
Mm.
And it's incredible how expensive it is to be healthy in this country.
Hmm. So you're talking about these topics that in our country, it feels like people are so standoffish to new perspectives, and there's so much quick assigning to. So like here's a great way to think of it. We can't have the conversation on free healthcare without someone immediately being offended and yelling, "Well, you're just a socialist." And it goes both ways.
Right.
It's not just one way or the other, but there's so much sort of like side assigning and like whose side are you on, like and just hearing the few articles you mentioned, like all of those things to me are really intriguing, and okay, I want to know more about that. But I also know the temperament of our country currently. Do you find
Right.
it hard to write any of this content where people aren't immediately feeling the need to diminish what you're saying, or who feel like on guard? Or what does that look like for you, especially in today's political climate?
Well, I know. So, if you've read any of my stuff, you know that I'm not necessarily a leftist, but I take a certain point of view. I look at racism as being very systemic. I talk about things such as a term that I learned, environmental racism. I talk about how discriminatory tech is. I talk about why Black boys cannot be victims. Are not looked at as victims. And so, Blake, when you take these stances, off tops that you're not going to be received well. Look, I could take a more moderate approach, a more centrist approach, if you will, on these subjects, but I would not be true to myself. And so when you take these approaches, you get nasty grams, right? You get
Mm-hmm.
people calling you racial slurs. You get people comments attacking you. That's just what it is. You have to know that when you are writing something that could be considered very incendiary, if I use the word correctly, then not everybody's going to like that. And if you can't take it, and look, not everyone can take this. Look, man, I get attacked all the time, and it started out to be tough, but my lady once told me, stop reading the comments. And that's such a simple thing to tell me, but what it did was that it sort of alleviated a lot of the stress that I had. So I just, yeah, man, I just kind of stopped reading the comments. And so, but I do understand that, Blake, some of the positions that I take, my pieces will not be read as widely as, say, someone who's, kumbaya. And I think everyone has a place. I'm at the point now where I don't deride people for how they communicate their positions. It's just that if it's not for me, it's not for me. But everyone has a place. Everyone has a right to say what they're going to say.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's. I think sometimes it's hard for people to understand that what is the norm for them is not the norm for someone else, and because it's
Exactly.
not the norm for someone else, it's not their fault. And it's kind of like, so here's a great way to think of it. My buddy was telling me about how it's really obnoxious how anytime he's ever gotten pulled over, he gets asked, "Is this your car?" And he was like,
right.
"Yes, this is my car." And I was listening to the story and I was like, I've never been asked that question. And he was like, exactly.
Right. Yeah.
And we were kind of laughing about it, but I was like, it's like, man. And he was saying he gets frustrated because someone will say, well, how are you driving? Like, what were you? And it's like, come on, man. Like, really? Like, how often do you have to think about like these 12 different things when you're driving? And so for me, what that does for me is I just think like, man, there's so many things that I am oblivious to, that to get exposed to another perspective, and this is just my perspective, to get exposed to a different perspective, for me, that's an opportunity to grow as a person and realize, oh my gosh, there are different things happening here. How do we really get a handle on this, rather than, if something's different for you, it's your fault, it's your choices, it's, what have you. LeRon, you still with me?
Sorry, yeah. Your friend that was talking about that, is he white? Is he black? Is
he's
he
black?
Asian?
Yeah, he's black.
Okay, yeah. So here's the deal. Like that is par for the course, right? I mean, things like that, like there's a term that I learned recently that I like to apply to everything. It's like, that's just the cost of blackness. That's something that a political commentator, Yvette Carnell, said. So that just, it comes with it. It's not fair, but life isn't fair, man. I mean, this is what happens. I mean, one thing that I've done, Blake, is that I tell every black person, I'm like, look, we live in a system of racism, white supremacy, where these things are bound to happen. So try not to get surprised when they do happen. It's like, oh, okay, well, yeah, well, I live in a system of racism. Duh, this is going to happen. I mean, it's inevitable. I mean, as sad as that sounds, I mean, it shouldn't happen. Like, I shouldn't have to. Like, years ago, I was mentoring a young man. Young black man, is about 13, 14 years old. And we had the talk, and I told him, I was like, listen, these are a couple of things that you're going to have to do to survive. And, it was very sad for me to tell him that. But, I would rather have him go into the world and be over-prepared than be under-prepared.
Right. Is there, and I'm trying to like how to ask this question. Like, is there a line somewhere, like a boundary somewhere where, and I don't want to say like, so here's where I'm getting at is I saw a video a few days ago, and there was a university where I guess it was a multicultural center, and a young woman was filmed doing an announcement for everybody in the center saying, attention, there's too many white people. This is our place. This is not your place. We need less white people to be here. Please go somewhere else. And
right.
And seeing that video, I can't help but feel, okay, it feels like we've kind of missed it a little bit, where, is there not like and I don't even know what I'm even really asking, man, other than like, it feels like these conversations are so vital, but then it feels like we almost, there's this point we get to where it's like, okay, wait, now it's now it's weird to me. I don't know. I don't even know what I'm asking other than like stuff like that. I mean, do you resonate with that, or is it do you see where she's coming
Yeah.
from? I mean, what help me
Yeah,
understand?
absolutely. No, so I haven't seen the video, so I can't really I can't make an accurate comment. I'll just say that so gosh, what do you know what university this was?
No. I mean, I could find it. I just
Okay, all right. So let's say this is not. Let's just say this is not NHBCU. And for those who don't know what that is, that's a historically black college and university. Let's say this is something like the University of Iowa or Ohio or the University of Michigan, just whatever. Most of those colleges are PWIs, and for those who don't know what that means is that is predominantly white institution. And so when you are a black person in those colleges, it's very imperative for you to have a space to where you can sort of congregate with people that look like you, with people that think like you, because I'll use this as an example, Blake. So I live in San Francisco. San Francisco is 4%, is maybe 4% black folks, right? That's an extremely low number. Like that's already microscopic. And so it is important for us to sort of band together. I mean, I don't want to say it like it's a survivalist thing, but when you are surrounded by people that don't look like you, that people that don't understand you, people that don't come from where you come from, that can be mentally challenging for you. So I don't see a problem with people wanting to organize student unions among themselves. Like I think that it's very healthy, especially when you are when you're a super minority there. I mean, it's amazing that we're segregated. Like, we're not sort of forced segregated, but there's places where I can't afford to go. There's places where I would not feel safe to go. And because some of us, want to sort of lend support to one another, now it's a problem. And I'm just like, well, that's kind of hypocritical. Because if we didn't live in a place where there was so much racism, then we would need it. Like, I can't imagine what today's college student goes through that goes to those colleges. I mean, I don't like to use the term microaggressions, like, but just so many little different things that impact them every single day. That I've read and I've heard so many stories, and it's just like, well, no stuff. Like that's why they want to seek comfort amongst each other. I mean, would we have the same reaction if there was a predominantly women's group, and if there were just men kind of coming in, and the woman says, hold up, there's too many men here.
Well, I think maybe the drama had centered around that, and maybe it's how we name things, but it being a multicultural center, I guess
Right.
people had maybe viewed the institution a little differently, and that's why, because there's been a pretty loud reaction to this story. And this was, by the way, this is the University of Virginia, and
okay.
And so I think maybe the perspective was, well, it's a multicultural center. Does that actually mean it's a non-white center? Does that actually mean, and like figuring out that clarity, I think is what, and really even like this conversation, I actually almost even wonder if like, and it's nothing really insightful about the story in particular, but it feels like there's some really important conversations to be had about race. But then there's these moments where it's hard to know how to react. What do I take from this to really like better myself, better society? It's I mean,
Well,
go ahead.
Well, like race is all, like for me, like race is always for many folks, race is always a really tough subject to talk about. because the thing about it is, like, I always say this, and I talk from a binary of black and white because I'm black, and that I don't know what it's like to be an Asian person, to be Latino. So I don't want to speak for them. So I'll say that when the racial conversation comes about, there's two things. Black people don't want to say anything that makes them look angry, right? They they don't want to be the
stereotype.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then white people are afraid to say the wrong things. So
totally.
So it's like we're kind of at this impasse where it's like, okay, well, I don't know what to do,
Right. Yeah. Well, and man, I think that's probably kind of like the value of, and frankly, this doesn't really come from the top in our country, but the value of just open dialogue and open conversation. Like if people can become more receptive to new perspectives, and it's it's a great way to think of it is like my cousin, he and I could not have any more different perspectives on like our country and politics. But every time I see him at like Thanksgiving or the holidays or whatever, we always just have a great conversation. It's like, well, what do you think about this? Why, why do people say this? And so it's almost like we've lost our ability to have an open dialogue and an open discussion. And it's like, because of that, when someone says a perspective that's different from what we think, again, we just assign them to a side and then we dismiss them. Like, oh, well, can't talk about that. So.
Right. Absolutely, man. I mean, like, you should, here's the thing. Like, I love to talk to people, and one of the things that I've learned, and that one of the major failings that we have whenever we talk to people is that we talk to respond and not to listen. So when we're talking to somebody, and if we're really not listening to them, we already have a response loaded up, ready to go, right?
Yeah.
So we're not really just kind of taking in what they're saying. We're just kind of just ready for them to just stop. Then we're just going to jump and just start kind of refuting what they're saying, trying to make their point look bad. But I think that we learn by listening, and you can't listen and talk at the same time. I mean, not fully. So this is like the conversation we're having right now. Like I'm really listening to everything that you say because I love dialogue, and because I think dialogue is very, very important. And so when you listen to what someone has to say, then your response could be different.
Yeah. Right. And I wish that was modeled a little bit more politically in our country. I think we'd all be much better off. So what's top of mind for you right now in terms of like what you're working on, what you're writing? Are there any? You've named some really great articles, and we're running out of time. I really wanted to.
Sure. Yeah.
You asked. I just saw a video yesterday about Terry Crews being sexually harassed. And the video was basically saying, come on, Terry, like you're a large black man. There's no way that you could have been sexually harassed. And it was pretty frustrating video to watch, honestly. But listening to you talk has just reminded me of that story. So we could only park there for a second, and then I want to talk about what else you're working on, and then we'll wrap up and be done.
I'll say as far as the Terry Crews situation, Blake, there's a lot of parts to that story, and this is all that I'll say. You never know what you'll do until you're in that situation. Like, we can all armchair quarterback about this. Well, I would have did this, but that man was in shock. He's around. Like, I don't blame Terry Crews for the way that he reacted. And that's all that I'll say about that.
Yeah.
Regarding,
go ahead.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Oh, so regarding the things that I'm working on right now, I've got a couple pieces that I'm waiting to be published that I'm going to start working. Like, the cool thing about this year, Blake, is that like, it's like top heavy busy. Like I'm actually developing a few more talks that I want to do. I'm developing a talk on the power of telling your story. I think that everyone has a story to share. And one of my responsibilities of being a writer is to encourage other people to write. And so I think that many of us, we are not confident because, we don't think that we can write like, say, Shakespeare. Well, first off, Shakespeare is the greatest writer to ever live. Like, he's so far from everybody. I mean, you don't have to write like Twain, another phenomenal writer. You don't have to write like Toni Morrison. Just write. You know what I mean? It's paralysis by analysis. And if you truly think that you don't know how to write, take a writing class. I think that we all need to tell our story, because when we do that, that shapes the narrative better. You just can't have just one type of folks just telling, what they're going through. I mean, like I've been very critical of movies like Little Women, Lady Bird, and those films because I'm like, look, there's got to be a story of a young white girl out here who doesn't come from privilege or who doesn't come from the suburbs, who's really out here grinding. One of my favorite films of all time is Winter's Bone. If you've not seen it, it's with Jennifer Lawrence. It's unreal, and it was a different story, and it was about a young lady who's from the Ozarks and who's trying to support her family. And I'm like, well, this is real. So that kind of story needs to be told. Look, we need a more fuller narrative of life.
That's true.
Because everybody's not rich and everybody's not poor, and everyone doesn't want to go to a university. Everyone doesn't have, poor family members or everyone doesn't want to, be an entrepreneur. I mean, I'm like, honestly, Blake, man, I'm so just thirsty for just like new viewpoints. So that's a talk that I'm developing.
I love it, man. Now, for the listeners, what's like the one thing you want them to go do after this episode? In terms of your content.
I would definitely like them to go to my website. It's www.leronbarton.com. It has a lot of my writing. It has a lot of my talks. And, you can also hit me on Twitter at mainline LeRon. I'm on LinkedIn, LeRon L. Barton. I'm on Instagram if you want to see me trying out new foods. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm just out there, and I love a good conversation. We don't have to agree on everything, as long as there's respect. And as long as there's no gaslighting, and there's just as long as we could just talk like two normal human beings, I'm 100% for it.
Yeah, well, and I think this conversation is a great example. I mean, I feel fuller having listened to you and having a conversation with you, and it's been great, man. I appreciate you coming on today.
Yeah, hey Blake, man, like this has been a great conversation, man. I appreciate the transparency. It was just like two guys just kind of shooting the So, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Thanks for keeping my show G-rated, by the way. Not everyone does that. So. Yeah. Well, for the listeners, thanks for checking out the episode. I will make sure I put LeRon's website in the episode description down below. Hey, if this is your first time listening to the show, what the heck you waiting on? Click that subscribe button so you can keep getting good advice content straight to your phone. And also, if you love this episode, which totally you should have, it was a great one, you got to leave the show a 5-star review. Stay tuned. We'll catch you later. Have a great week.